The fear of the Lord I see all over Paul's story. And the rebirth, the new place where Paul stepped out of who he was and into a new man came out of the fear of the Lord. The Lord stopped him on the road to Damascus, and it demanded change. You've heard me say it. The Lord said, I do not change, and that demands that you change. And thankfully, most of us don't have to have a road to Damascus experience, but whatever your experience was with him when you met him in that place, I have come up this year in the fear of the Lord. Come up in a place where I see him differently. I see me differently. I see the devil differently. Because when he changes your perspective on him, it changes your perspective on everything. So as we go, let's go back to 2 Corinthians chapter 11. We've talked about how Paul was really experiencing this chapter, really chapter 10 as well, and maybe more of it. I haven't researched. The Lord just started showing me this recently. Chapter 11, you're really hearing a raw emotion from him, a correction to the church at Corinth, but also you hear his feelings in here. You hear, he said, he's committed to this call of God on his life. He says, I promised that you would be a pure bride. I promised you as a pure bride to one husband, Christ. He's like, I'm supposed to be getting you ready for him. I'm supposed to be presenting you as a pure bride to hand him. And I hear in his word, y'all are making that hard. And he starts to talk to them and get on to them. But I feel the weight of that calling and the circumstances that he's looking at. And yeah, sometimes you have to have some real conversations with people. You have to hit some real boundaries. And we talked about all that. But moving on into what Paul was saying, let's see, where do we want to pick this up? Let me just kind of continue with what he was expressing to them. And as I read this, I thought, this sounds like a mom or a dad. It sounds like a pastor having to bring correction to a member of his congregation, or even not just congregation and not just bringing correction, but just sometimes you just want to complain about the people that you're dealing with, or the people at work, or the people at church, or the people that are living in your house. I'll just say it. But he says, he's talking about whatever they dare boast about, and he's talking about these false prophets, these people that keep trying to act like, these false apostles that are trying to act like the real thing. He said, whatever they boast about, I dare to boast about it too. Are they Hebrews? So am I. He says, are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I can hear his irritation in here. He said, I have served him far more. I felt like that before. He said, I have worked harder, been put in prison more often, been whipped times without number. I've faced death 5 different times, he says. The Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. Once I spent a whole night and a day adrift at sea. I've traveled many long journeys. I've faced danger from rivers, from robbers, from my own people, the Jews as well as from the Gentiles. I have faced danger in the cities, in the deserts, on the seas. I've worked hard and long, enduring many sleepless nights. I have been hungry and thirsty and have often gone without food. He told them already, he said, my ministry to you didn't even cost you anything. It came out of my pocket. It came out of my partner's pockets. He said, to bring you what I bring you. He said, I've shivered in the cold without enough clothing to keep me warm. Then beside all this, I have the daily, listen to this. Let me break right here. What's he saying? He is describing his circumstances, and as he's doing it, he's describing the condition he has lived in because of them, because of the call of God on his life, because of his efforts to get them the word, because of his efforts to help them. Have you ever felt like that with anybody in your life? Have you felt like, man, Lord, I have just done this and this and this and this? And it's out of a commitment to the Lord. And you hear Paul's commitment to the Lord in this, to do what he said. But it's like, these people, Lord, I can hear his heart. He's looking at the people that he's supposed to be helping to become a pure bride that he can present to Jesus. And it's so easy to get our eyes and our mind focused on how people are affecting us, how the call of God is affecting us, how difficult it is, what it's costing you. And I repeat again what Tim Ross said, God can't heal what you won't reveal. And sometimes even when it comes out like this, we have to just express it to God. You know, sometimes God calls us to express it to people because there needs to be a boundary drawn and there needs to be truth and love spoken. He's loving them as he's telling them these things, and yet on the inside of him and what I hear pouring forth in this emotional dialogue is the fear of man, what they're doing, what he's having to do, the lack he's had to do it in, the price that it cost him. You know, there are many times we have to consider that, and we have to look at the situation. But as we are expressing, there is a place, I believe the Lord is calling us, that we keep talking about, of the fear of the Lord, his awesomeness. I mean, you could take every one of these things that he just said, all the way going back to the fact that he said, other partners have paid for me to minister to you. But can we talk about the fear of the Lord and the awesomeness of the Lord, that he had partners in Macedonia that gave to him liberally, that the Philippians gave to him so liberally out of what they had that they empowered him to take the gospel to Corinth. They empowered his walk. They empowered him to be able to step out into these places of ministry. Can we talk about that he was shipwrecked 3 times and yet he lived? He got where he was supposed to be. He was beaten. He was left for dead. And he was resurrected. All these things have happened to Paul because of the awesomeness of God. So even in the midst of all of the trouble, and even when there are times when you are rehearsing all those moments in your mind, come back to how big he is. You are still here. He is always enough. Sometimes we run from him. Sometimes people get angry with God when something happens. Does he leave? No. He just keeps walking with you, allowing you to express your heart to him, allowing you to express what is down in there that you are angry with him. He would rather you express it to him than just punch it down and ignore it. Because he's so big and his love is so magnificent for us. And yet, the fear of the Lord demands that we see that we are living in times that are not really and truly about us as individuals on a universal scale. And yet, to have God's plan come to pass on a universal scale, that that he planned before the foundation of the world. He planned it so that that plan would come to pass when he was able to get into us and our life so intimately and on a one-on-one basis that he talks about we becoming cornerstone, a living stone set in unison with him as an individual, on an individual basis, who would become so one with him that we would be one with each other.